Welcome back to 52 Lockup. I am your Apple Teeny Cadma, a bit in Apple TV. 52 Lockup is a series I started talking about my biggest passion, true crime. Every Cadmaniac week, a Cadmaniac crime, right? So we have 52 weeks, 52 crimes. That is the whole getup, right? So I hope you guys enjoy. Be sure to like, leave some feedback, subscribe, and of course, viewer discretion is always advised. So, let's head back over the pond, not to Britain, but we're going a little further back. We're actually heading over to Russia. Again, I know. We're doing a lot of road trips. Okay. So, let's begin with Maxim Yuryevich Fomin, or more formally known as the blogger Vladlen Tatarsky. Now, Maxim was born on April 25th, 1982 in Makivka of Donetsk, of the Ukrainian Soviet Union, right? So he's born to his mother, Ravilia Ibragimova. Not much is known about her, but at least I got a name, right? Because it's a little hard to find out about the past. However, I did find out that in 2011, Maxim was actually part of a bank robbery in Ukraine, would be captured, convicted, and sentenced. So to continue this story, for those of you who may not actually know, March 2014 is when the Kremlin, Vladimir Putin, began his invasion into the Ukraine, right, to the annexation of Crimea. And people chose to mind their business then. Putin was like doing his thing, and they were like, oh, what you doing? Like, the Munich Agreement of 1938. During the beginning of this war, Maxim was like, this might be a good time to break out of jail. I'm doing it. So they break out. They would actually end up joining the military of the Russian-backed Donetsk People's Republic. He would actually eventually be caught again and then imprisoned again. I wonder if this is where Yevgeny, Wagner's group, Suicide Squad, was he testing the ideas then? I'm just curious. You know what I mean? Maybe we could use them. Anyways, Maxim would actually he's imprisoned again, right? But he would eventually be pardoned by Alexander Zakharchenko, who was the head of the Donetsk People's Republic, and he was then presented with the opportunity to fight against the Ukrainian army alongside the Vostok Battalion during the war in Donbass. Now, around 2017, Maxim would decide, all right, I've had a really good military career. I should start blogging, be like an influencer. I mean, haven't we all, done that, right? Still a little slightly unrelatable, but whatever. However, Maxim didn't want to use his real name. He wanted to use a pen name, which would be Vladlen Tatarsky, which is actually an allusion of Vladimir Lenin, the Russian Marxist that proposed the establishment of the dictatorship of the proletariat led by a revolutionary vanguard party as a political prelude to the establishment of, you guessed it, communism, which is titled as Leninism. Oh man, would my global history teacher still be proud of me? You remember that? Hi, Mr. Phil. Absolute best. Anyways, their pen name was a blend of Vladimir Lenin and the Russian satirist Victor Pelevin's character Vladlen Tatarsky, right? From the Generation P, which is actually short for Generation Pizdets, which roughly translate to Generation Screwed. We like to call them Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z, and Gen A. But anyway, Generation P leads to the protagonist, right? Tatarsky, who is a student, a poet, encounter tribulations on their self-discovering journey after being tossed onto the streets, right? The Soviet Union falls, crumbles. Let me get into this. The protagonist begins to create Russian versions of the Western advertisements, right? And they thrive in their success. Right, the protagonist begins to question and try to define culture, and they begin losing themselves in their material possessions, their personal self-journey, self-indulgence. Tatarsky begins to see patterns, right, in life, everywhere, and it starts to begin to interpret it as hidden meanings behind the chaos of life, right? However, part of this hidden purpose through the reading ends up being related to Mesopotamian religious practices, particularly the goddess Ishtar, who is the goddess of war, love, sexuality, fertility, and responsible for all love. Speaking of Ishtar, hope everyone had a happy Easter, huh? So the lead protagonist, Tatarsky, begins to experiment with different hallucinating drugs. I mean, we're talking about mushrooms, vodka, and a Ouija board. Don't ask me where that comes in, but there's a Ouija board, which connects them to Che Guevara. Yes, the Argentinian Marxist, whose face is often on t-shirts at gift shops. Everyone knows it. Even if you don't know who he is, you know the shirt when you say oh yeah, I see someone with that. Anyways, Tatarsky, right, begins to comprehend that politics and life events on television, right, these digital creations they're just fake. And then they start to realize, they go, who's driving the fabrications of this life? Who's doing all this? Who is the ultimate source, right? So now there's a ritual sacrifice. Tatarsky ends up becoming the goddess Ishtar's new regent. And then they start to see that their electric double, right, online becomes a ubiquitous presence on Russian television, right? It is in that moment that they realize that as much as they saw past the fakeness, the fake news, right, that they were just as part of the problem or the illusion, if you will. Now, I only explained the book because it seems Maxim's life seems to replicate it in its own way, mixed with some militariness. It's rather interesting that it's like George Orwell's, you know what I mean? Like the speculation of the future of humanity kind of thing. In Maxim's writing, they reflected on the war in Donbass, right? He wrote about thousands of Russian officers served in the region since October 2014. The blog became profound amongst Russian military bloggers, which eventually became like a group known for their undying support for the Russo-Ukrainian war. His popularity grew even more in February 2022, and he would be even invited to political shows on the state television. I mean, he was known for his criticism of the Russian military commanders and Vladimir Putin for being too soft in their approach. I know, you were going to be like, yeah, oh, what? So the Ukrainian invasion would catch the world's attention, right? Again, February 2022, Maxim's article about thousands of soldiers, being in the region in October of 2014 would actually contradict when the Russian Federation was like, what? Now we not have military out there? No, yeah, we've never been in there before, like this year, like 2022. Where you get that idea from? So Maxim, or Vladlen Tatarsky, moves to Moscow in 2019 until about this year, roughly. Can you believe that the fact that he said Putin was being too soft? He's got it going hard. That's literally like someone coming up to you and going, hey, I want your house. And you're like, nah. And they're like, why not? And you're like, I live here. And they're like, well, I'm taking it, okay? And you're like, what the? No. I was just here minding my business. Like, why are you in my space? And, and then they're like, well, because power over people is what I deserve. And they're like, says who? And then they're like, well, me. You're like, not good enough, right? You'd be ready to fight back, right? And then as soon as you fight back, they'd be like, does everyone see how they're treating me? Like, complete victim mentality, but whatever, I'm digressing. Maxim also wrote about their interviews with field commanders, right? And about what was happening out in the front lines, to keep people updated, including the alcohol and drug abuse amongst the soldiers, or as like what he would like to call soldiers, orcs, in Donbass. That was his word, like as if he was out there writing. You know what? I'm just gonna leave my commentary to the side. At least try my best to. By 2022, he became more and more aligned with the Kremlin, right, and advertised more optimism than even most pro-Russian writers, right, on Telegram, which is where he, even to the point that he believed Russia could keep control of Kherson, right? Advertising, propaganda, starting to seem a little familiar, right? However, being pro-Kremlin is one thing, but Maxim demanded for more attacks on the Ukrainian infrastructure that would result in more Ukrainian casualties. Ukraine would be referred to as a terrorist state. This is so weird. This propaganda seems so familiar. I mean, but when you think about it, like, who controls the past, controls the future, and who controls the present, controls the past. Anyways, there's a video of Maxim saying, we'll defeat everyone, we'll kill everyone, we'll rob everyone. We need to. Everything will be the way we like it. Mind your business. Anyway, Maxim's pro-Kremlin status gathered many followers, right, to his words, to continue their propaganda, because all we know is war is peace and freedom is slavery and ignorance is strength, right? Everyone knows that, right? Yeah? Okay, cool. So Maxim became so popular that he would be sanctioned by Ukraine and banned from ever entering the country for 10 years. And any of his assets that he had that were in Ukraine, they were confiscated. I mean, I get that. That's like someone disrespecting your house and they're like, hey, I'm coming over Tuesday. You be like, what? You ain't coming over. What you mean? You're not allowed in my home. You're not safe. No. Maxim, right, was even would become to be a popular guest speaker, right, at the popular St. Petersburg Cafe, which also happened to used to be owned by the Suicide Squad, the Wagner Group, Yevgeny, So we're back to Yevgeny again. Anyway, Maxim would be there on April 2nd, 2023. Allegedly, a woman named Daria Trepova would enter the cafe and brought a box with a bust of Tatarsky. Literally, the Trojan horse of his supercilious pride. The bust would actually carry a bomb inside. Now, Maxim would be killed, and that would be actually recorded, 24 others injured, and 6 of those 24 in critical condition, according to Russian authorities. The bombing of his death was actually caught on camera. So, where did this come from? Who is Daria Trepova? Well, I found a little bit of information about her, but not as much as I would like to. So apparently she grew up and attended school in Pushkin, right? That was the town, which is right outside of St. Petersburg. She would later enroll herself at St. Petersburg State University, although it is believed that she didn't complete her schooling, and they don't know what faculty she was in just quite yet, but no one's really sure just quite yet. And she even apparently worked at a vintage clothing shop in the city. But she had quit her job, apparently roughly about a month ago, to go move to Moscow of this year. At some point, she would meet Dmitry Rylov, she met them. We don't know when, but we know that they got married. Like, the wins are very confusing, but we know that they're married, right? So, when Putin was like, hey, everyone, let me do what I wanted back in 2014. I'm going to go back to Ukraine in 2022, right? So Daria and her husband, Dmitry, they would protest against the war, and both of them would be arrested for protesting, for allegedly ignoring the police requests for the crowd to disperse and stop protesting against the war. In short, for disagreeing peacefully. But anyway, Daria would be detained for 10 days. And her husband was also a member of a small fringe oppositional group called the Libertarian Party, which was involved in a lot of the demonstrations, right? Going, no, you know what I mean? So the same party announced on the Telegram channel Soda that Daria was not part of their party officially. And they also condemned the killing of Tatarsky. Of course, right, due to their marriage, there have been reports of this interest in her husband, Dmitry, as a connection to the bombing. Her husband, Dmitry, even suggested to the news that he thinks his wife was even duped, you know what I mean? Rope and a dope kind of thing. That she was too incapable of committing murder, that it wasn't in her, right? You know what I mean? Meaning that she had no clue that she was giving this pro-Kremlin blogger this bomb. And I quote him, he says, yes, it's true that neither of us support the war in Ukraine, but we believe that such acts are impermissible. I'm 100% sure that she would have never agreed to anything like this if she had known about it. So, there are reports stating that the Russian investigators have not completely, right, ruled out the possibility that Daria did not know what was inside the bus. She had no idea she was carrying a Trojan horse. No idea. Now, this incident would be criticized by Margarita Simonyan, who is a Russian journalist that has been even sanctioned by the European Union as a central figure of the Russian government's propaganda and being responsible for actions and policies that undermine Ukraine, who would also impose sanctions against her as well for supporting the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In October 2022, Margarita encouraged Russian citizens to choose death over defeat in Ukraine, even though Putin started, I don't know, maybe she's had too much of what her name is, but whatever. So the incident was also criticized by Tina Karalecki, a Russian, Georgian journalist, television presenter, producer, and a co-owner of the company Apostol, right? Who is like very pro-Kremlin. Tina was like, no, this was no, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. Also who spoke out very freely about the situation was the Russian television presenter, journalist, and activist, Anton Krasovsky, right? Criticized the bombing, right? Do you not know what Anton was? Anton made some political statements that got him in trouble in October 20th of 2022, stating that Ukrainian children who hate Russia should be drowned and burned. Yeah, that was Anton. So it's giving Eastman vibes. You know what I mean? Like, it's very Eastman, you know? But bombing the cafe, right? The image of the pro-war, right? What do you think about that? Is that a horrible crime? Is it a necessary evil? Is it like that question where people ask, like, if you could go back in time and kill Hitler before they come into power, would you do it? Military historian Kimberly Kagan's American Research Group assessed that the bombing may be a warning, right, to other Russian commentators, and maybe to intimidate Wagner-aligned actors. After the bombing, Maxim would be granted the Russian State Order of Courage, right? We went over that in the Suicide Squad, right? Remember that episode, right? See how it's all correlating? Anyway, it has been reported that hundreds gathered for the funeral of Vladlen Maxim. I didn't see who they said was the hundreds, but whatever. Would you stop Hitler as a child, right? Would you do it? Would you encourage Hitler's art maybe instead of, hoping to like prevent a major travesty from happening? If someone is attacking you and you are defending your home and then you apply the standard ground law, the shoot first law, the castle doctrine, should you be reprimanded for the, do people get the right to judge you? Say that that's bad? That's a tough call. What do you think? Tatarsky blogged about also substance abuse, right? That the soldiers were diving themselves into, as well as from being in the front line. What happens to us when war happens, right? Yeah, I get it. There's unity amongst the community when there's a common enemy, right? And everyone makes that joke like, if aliens attack the planet, we'd all come together. I still don't think so, but whatever. After years of war, the results only create broken health systems, a damaged infrastructure, and shatters the economy. Soldiers will develop PTSD and try to cope with it with the resources that they have, even if it is substance abuse. Soldiers protect civilians and do so much more for other people that they don't even know, right? They do more than what anyone can ask. And it's unfair to be sent out to die for the sake of appeasing some greed. Like, it just don't make no sense to me. You know what I mean? It's just like... Anyways, did you know that this Russia-Ukraine war has led to the increase of several commodities, including fertilizers, food products, and oil and gas? Yeah, the supply chain disruptions have increased freight charges, created container shortages, and lowered the availability of warehouse spacing. At the bottom of the supply and demand chain are you and me. This NIMBY ideology of it's not in my backyard is very dangerous because it's in everyone's backyards. At least no one sees it until it actually is, right? Fun fact, did you know that right before World War II, the second Sino-Japanese war was initiated, right? And the Japanese were snatching up Chinese territory, right? And then the infamous rape of Nanking, right? The Chinese capital had occurred, right? To break down the spirit of the Chinese resistance, Japanese General Matsui Iwane ordered the city of Nanking to be completely destroyed. The city would be burned. Soldiers committed terrible acts against civilians, like butchering, like an estimated 150,000 men, war prisoners, and then an additional 50,000 men who were civilians, and then raped at least minimum 20,000 women and girls, right? They were also mutilated and killed during the process. The U.S. government would put pressure on Japan after that. They were like, hey, but this is what we call the Allison incident. Let me finish. And the Japanese forces who were there in Nanking were like, I'm sorry, John Moore, arimasen. Like, I'm so sorry. I'm serious. They apologize. John Moore Allison is actually an American diplomat, and Japan would place their officers and soldiers that were involved in the incident under court martial. The incident was actually thereby resolved, right? But crazy. But when Hitler was threatening a European war, unless the Sudetenland, a border area of Czechoslovakia, containing an ethnic German majority, were to be surrendered to Germany. The leaders of Britain, France, and Italy agreed to Germans' annexation. That sounds familiar, it's crazy. Of the Sudetenland, right? In exchange for peace with them. No one from Czechoslovakia was actually in the meeting. It's weird. So it became known as the Munich Agreement of 1938. Hey, Mr. Phil. That's like person A going I want that. And they're like, no, this is my home. And they're like, well, if someone doesn't give it to me, I'm fighting with everyone. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. And then the person who hears this just runs over hey, whoa. What you mean you don't fight with me? Tell you what, you can have his stuff. It's fine. You could take it. It's cool. And the other person's like, what you mean? What? And they're like, yeah, cool. Thanks, we have that agreement. We're good. And then I presume Hitler saw that as no one was willing to get involved, and he was like, I think I take a little more. And he took a little more, and a little more, and a little more, and a little more, and a little more. And as we all say, the history, well, the rest was history as we know it, right? History truly does repeat itself. And the victor always gets to rewrite the history, right? So, what do you think of this crime? The bombing. Yes, it's unfortunate that there were 24 other individuals. But in times of war, what do you think? Anyways, as always, stay safe and stay vigilant.